firstly, universities are the only places, which facilitate intergenerational transfer of knowledge. Yeah. So it's an intergenerational transfer of knowledge. It's an intergenerational exchange of knowledge. So I don't think there's any other sort of platform where this kind of robust transfer, happens. So this is important. Wisdom, transferred to the younger generation, and similarly, thoughts and processes, exchange. Second, universities are agencies for creation of knowledge. So if we have to achieve the sustainable development goals, yeah, one is of course knowledge about the goals, but also it's technology, both natural and social technology, that would be required to bring about these traits, that can help India achieve the goals. And universities are repositories of knowledge. They are creators of knowledge. So this is why universities have a role. And the third is what is called as an upstream and a downstream influence on science, on policy, and on practices. So universities is basically an interface, where there's an upstream influence into policy, from the university in terms of research, and there's also a downstream influence into community in terms of practices. So this is why universities are a fantastic platform for actually integrating education for sustainable development goals, into all the processes that they are doing. So and we as teachers, I think, are in this sense, are key cogs in this entire wheel, facilitating this entire process. So personally, for me, I feel that it's a very interesting decade we live in. Yeah, because this is the decade that can really make or break the future of the earth. And I feel that as a teacher, I have a very important role to play in preparing this younger generation, to be part of this change movement through my own teaching, my own curriculum, the various activities that I do in an academic sphere. So in this sense, I feel that as an individual, I will contribute to India's achievement of the SDGs and overall the global achievement of the SDGs. And this highlights the role that every teacher can play, in helping the nation and the world achieve its sustainable development goals, by not going outside and, doing a dharna or activism or whatever else it is, just within your own sphere of work, in the regular sphere of work that we do. And this brings us again, to what really is ESD. So for this, I'd like to draw your attention to goal 4, that's education. It's quality education. So one of the very important pillars of the SDG goals. And this particular goal actually talks about policy interventions, because education is a multiplier, and it sets out a number of targets. So there are all of these targets. There are 6 targets here on the screen. Firstly, free, equitable, quality primary and secondary education. Access to quality early childhood development. Affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education. Yeah. Increase skills among the youth. Eliminate gender disparities in education. And if you look at this, there's a lot happening in the country, at various levels of fulfillment to achieve all of these goals. But what we are most concerned is with goal 4.7, which is by 2030, ensure that all the learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. So does your syllabus, does your curricula, bring this about? Does it ensure that there is a knowledge transfer, there's a skill development for sustainable development? How do you do this? You bring in issues of sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, a culture of peace and non-violence. And I'm really happy that you all put this down as your solutions. And it's now time to see how these solutions can get incorporated into our curricula at university level. So global citizenship, appreciation of diversity around us, diversity that exists naturally, but also social diversity, a diversity in thoughts, yeah, as well as this contribution that culture can make to sustainable development. So without really aping the West? What is it that is within our culture that can contribute to sustainable development? And I feel that universities have a very, very strong role to play in this target 4.7, because through this, we are really moving this agenda of SDGs forward. So the UN has now come up with this concept, which is called as ESD for 2030, a concept which is implemented at the school level as well as at the university level. And there are a number of international platforms that are now sharing best practices in university education for achieving the sustainability development goals. So it's really a force multiplier. It's an enabler and a force multiplier, for achieving the goals in that sense. So the objective of ESD for 2030 is to integrate knowledge about the SDGs, including the skills needed, into teacher educators, into curricula, and ensure, mobilization of young people and action at the local level. So while there may be a global problem, what we need to understand is a student can only do so much. So if this is a global problem, if for example, Mumbai has a problem of, air pollution, what is it that I can do at the university level? Can I teach the student to actually say, okay, there is a problem of air pollution. How do we measure air pollution? What is the hypothesis which is needed for formulating these kind of measurements? So every big problem can be broken down into what is it that the child or the student can do at that university level, so that we are building his own knowledge and technical capacity, social capacity to deal with this problem. So action learning, is this integrated into our curriculum? So United Nations says that ESD can accelerate the achievement of all the other SDGs. And that's true. Because if you're aware about it, if you have the knowledge, you're working with it, it's really possible. So first is by raising awareness about the goals. So do your curricula incorporate information about the goals? Is sustainability, sustainable development, ESD, a part of your curriculum? Yeah, or can it be fitted in somewhere? Can the curriculum, not necessarily through a separate subject approach, but through an integrated approach, promote this critical and contextualized understanding, contextualized to the student's context and contextualized to the local context? Can this bring in, which means, can we bring in the discussion of local issues into the curriculum? How do we build skills that mobilizes action? So does the curricula have the space and the framework for getting students involved in, action learning, exploring, measuring, within whatever subjects they study, whether it's philosophy or geography or, physics or biology or geology, whatever, because this really transcends boundaries. So if you look at the goals, they're not all related to science. I mean, poverty is much an economic and a social issue. So you have gender disparity, which of course transcends boundaries. So you have so many goals which actually cut across. And what is really needed is an interdisciplinary approach. So if you need to begin the transformation, and this is again what the UN says, is firstly contextualize the learning. Yeah, bringing in the local context into the learning process. Evolving the pedagogy, so moving away from a teacher delivered system to more a learner centered pedagogy, involving the students, making them responsible for their own learning, right? So I think the pandemic, in that sense, a lot of good universities sort of flipped the classroom, where all the lectures were already available online, so that the students need not come online to listen to the professor. They come online to discuss with the professor after having read this. So different kinds of learning pedagogies. Looking at, again, doing projects that have a relevance to the society, and at the end involving them in becoming catalyzers in societal transformation. So if you look at universities, one is transforming the learning environment. So of course policy, and I think we should say the first one we already have, in terms of the national education policy. And as in all universities, most universities are now setting up cells to actually see how the NEP can be introduced and implemented within the university system. Yeah, so that's one. So it's already there, and that's, I think, lucky for us. Second is, I think I would say, using the NEP to transform the learning environment where learners are responsible for their own learning. The third is the capacity building of educators, and which is why I feel that talking to university teachers is extremely important to bring in this awareness about the role that educators have in catalyzing the change through their own learner community. And through this learner community, then mobilizing action, community action at the ground level, which can happen through a lot of college university activities. It can happen through research projects. It can happen through co-curricular projects and extracurricular projects. So, and at the end of the day, through all of this, ensuring that people at large, even the children's own or the students' own families, they become aware of this kind of transformative processes. So if you look at what we have in terms of policy, it's the national education policy which is there. And the first, if you say how should universities really do this? So using the NEP, I think one of the first things would be to relook at the curriculum framework and say, do you want to include sustainability as a sort of a core course into all your programs? Or would you like to have a small component about sustainability within the various courses that you have in a program? Talking about geology or geography or philosophy or history or economics, or science. So whatever it is. And at the same time, building what we call as a whole institution approach, where the institution itself is geared towards sustainability. Here again, I would say that the Green Campus program of the UGC, which the Green Campus is just a tool, but to do a Green Campus, you need a whole institution approach. And all of you who are involved with NIRF know that you do have to report on Green Campus, So this can become a tool for starting off a whole institution approach. The key, of course, is ensuring that we have these transformative learning practices, student-centered learning practices, that bring about this transformative education. And I think this is where the capacity building of teachers, of college teachers, is extremely important, because unlike school, college teachers do have a lot of flexibility to do things a bit differently. And it's only when things are done differently, you're teaching, but you're teaching through a mode where the students are responsible for their own learning. And the third is through your curriculum framework and your pedagogy, facilitating what we call as interdisciplinary learning and transdisciplinary learning. So inter is when you are actually using the knowledge from different elite subjects to solve a problem, and that's different from multidisciplinary. And transdisciplinary is when we recognize that society harbors knowledge, and very often academia works in isolation of this knowledge that is existing in society. So can you make the common people, a part of your learning process? Can they team up with people, to do that? We did a little experiment in here about 2 years ago before the pandemic, where to teach this issue of water, we actually, went out to some of the fringe villages here in Pune, talked to people, and set up a team of students and community members who interacted with each other. So students moving out of their bookish knowledge, and community members sharing their wisdom, but also at the same time getting a grounding in scientific principles. Yeah. So it is like saying, yes, you do know something, and let's formulate a project together. So it needs a lot of initiative on part of the teacher, but it also needs a framework that allows you to do that. And I think with the NEP, we can't say, okay, I can't do it, because we can do it. The NEP actually talks about doing this. So the goals of the NEP are very much aligned with goal 4.7. I mean, this is something that, as teachers, we can leverage. So when we look at what should the curriculum really do?